Mirror, mirror on my table, who is the fairest of them all? Me? Is that because of my light eyes, my blondish eyebrows, my reddish mustache? Okay, mirror, let's turn on your UV superpowers and show me how much sun damage I've gotten over the years. Ah! Is that because I took my fair freckled skin out as a mountain guide for years and as a triathlete? Oh! Well, at least maybe I can look gnarly if I put on some sunscreen and look like a football player, yeah. The first time you hear a dermatologist say you have cancer, it comes as a life-changing shock.
The summer of 2016, great summer, was playing volleyball, working as a model, hanging out with friends, traveling, and then August I noticed this small little lesion, almost like pimple-like, right on the side of my nose. It started bleeding, and then it scabbed, and then it would go away. So I didn't think anything of it, and then it came back. There was something in my gut that said, like, you need to go get it checked out. I asked the dermatologist if he would do a biopsy on it. I got a phone call and he said to me, "You have cancer." I was like, what is going on? Is this for real? The first time I saw my face, I took off the bandage and almost passed out.
If you're me and your first skin cancer was 25 years ago, when the dermatologist calls, your question is, how do I make this stop? Is it just about sunscreen, hats, and regretting your past? Or are there creams and foods that actually work and aren't just hype? Incredibly, there are creams that are over 80% effective in preventing future skin cancers, and the bonus is they make your skin look younger. I never knew. And convincing trials do show there are foods that make our skin less prone to sunburn, and they give that beautiful, glowy, warm look that so many people want. I wish I'd known these things years ago, but better late than never. This episode has 4 parts. 1, what are these confusingly named cancers? And why are they so variable? 2, who gets these cancers and why? 3, really? Miracle creams? 4, what foods actually create the glowy, sun-protected skin we all want? Part 1, what are these cancers? Well, hello, Dr. Kelley. Good to see you, especially when you're not ready to cut me open with a knife.
I'm sure that's preferable.
So you're a dermatopathologist and a surgeon. Can you explain what those mean?
Yeah, so within the field of dermatology, there's a lot of subspecialties, and Mohs surgery is one of them, which you can go and do extra training on and become board certified. And another one is dermatopathology, and that's where you look under the microscope at any biopsies that might be taken. And so I did an extra fellowship training in that, and I'm also board certified in that.
So when you go in to do a Mohs surgery on me, and then you take some tissue, what happens? You take it away and come back an hour later and with either a smile or not?
Yeah. So the Mohs technique is probably the best technique for cutting out skin cancer for this very reason, is that we get to check everything under the microscope. All right. So there's no guesswork involved. We do it while you're there. And so yes, I numb up the spot, I take it out, and then I take it to my lab where we process it into these glass slides. And then I review everything, essentially 360 degrees of the tumor, if that's what it takes, to make sure we get it all out.
In consumer language, can you explain what the big 3 skin cancers are?
So the big 3 skin cancers, by that I mean the most common skin cancers, are basal cell carcinoma, the number 1. That probably makes up 70 to 80% of all the skin cancers. The second most common is squamous cell carcinoma. That makes up probably 15% or so. And the rest of them are melanoma, which is the third most common, but it's also the most dangerous out of all 3.
Why are they named like they're named?
So any cell in your body can go bad. By that, I mean any cell can potentially turn into skin cancer. And the skin has several different layers to it. One of them is the basal layer, for which the word basal cell carcinoma comes from. So if one of those cells goes bad, it becomes a basal cell carcinoma. The layer on top of that is called the squamous layer. And if one of those cells goes bad, it becomes a squamous cell carcinoma. And kind of interspersed along the basal layer, there's something called melanocytes. And those are the cells that allow us to tan. Makes some people a lot more susceptible to the sun, some people a lot less. And if those cells go bad, again, that's what makes up a melanoma.
Those cells produce melanin. That's the brown and black
Exactly, yeah.
tint in your skin, and that's why it's named melanoma.
Yep.
The word squamous is from the Latin word for fish scales. I don't get that.
Yeah. So a lot of the terminology in medicine comes from either the Latin or the Greek, and it's really descriptive. So it's either what we're seeing clinically on the skin in this case, or what we see under the microscope. And the squamous layer makes up the part of the skin that you shed off. So that's the scaly part.
So you mentioned with basal cell, when I've been in to visit you twice already to get different basal cells removed, you mentioned that they lay down roots. Can you explain that?
Like we mentioned, basal cell is the most common type of skin cancer. It's from sunshine, but not all basal cells are alike. Some of them can grow just on the surface of the skin, which we call superficial basal cell. And then some of them can grow deeper roots, is what I described to you. And those roots can have different characteristics to them. Some of them can go straight down, almost like a carrot would, if you can imagine that. And others can have very, very deep roots, almost like bamboo. And so the reason that matters is because it determines or it drives the way we treat them. So if it's just on the surface of the skin, sometimes we can get away with using a topical cream or just scraping the top. But if they have deeper roots, those methods aren't going to work. So then we have to resort to cutting them out.
Why are these incisions so long, like the one you made on my cheek here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's one I get almost on a daily basis. It has a lot to do with how we sew people, what's going to look best in the long term when we sew people up. If this basal cell were on a back, for example, we can just zip it up in a straight line. But when we're dealing with places on the head and neck, the contours and the tensions, all those lines are different. And so traditionally, the length of the scar has to be about 3 times the length of the diameter of the hole that we produced. So just to give you an idea, that's going to allow us to close it all in a straight line without any puckering. And that's just to close it in a straight line. Occasionally we can't do that, and we have to do other things called flaps and grafts, and those require us to use different angles for the scar. So it's important to know ahead of time that your scar is probably going to be a little bit bigger than you think it will.
I got a skin graft on my nose last year, and for a basal cell. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing. You can maybe you can see it, but to the untrained eye, nobody notices it. So, but it's a pretty big patch. It's like the size of a dime or something.
Yeah. The good news is you heal pretty well, so that matters too.
Basal cell carcinoma, they don't metastasize very often, right?
That's right. Yeah. There are a few every year that do metastasize. Those are typically the ones that are huge. In other words, somebody's let it develop so long, grow for years, and then they can eventually metastasize. But almost no melanomas metastasize. They are just what we call locally aggressive, so they grow in place kind of like a weed.
So, but they can create a fair amount of local damage? They
can. Yeah, they really can, especially depending on where they grow. They can be fairly disfiguring, and like you just mentioned, they can be kind of the tip of an iceberg. What you see on the surface, there can be a lot more under the skin.
And can you see how much is under the skin, or you have to look at it under the microscope? How do you know how far to cut?
We usually start with just what we see on the surface, and then everything else is determined under the microscope. So we don't want to take any more than we have to. That's kind of the benefit of doing Mohs surgery, is we can make sure the holes stay small. But occasionally we'll run into, again, that deep network of roots, and we have to take out quite a bit more.
Squamous cell cancers can metastasize in some cases?
Yes, they can. So the majority of squamous cells do not. That's the important thing to know. But we treat hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these a year. And there are a certain percentage of them that behave poorly. And that has a lot to do with what they look like under the microscope. Okay, so if they look aggressive under the microscope, or if they're wrapping around nerves, or if they're getting into blood vessels, those things can contribute to them spreading. And also the location on the body where they grow, that matters as well. So squamous cells that grow on the ears, squamous cells that grow on lips, or other mucosal surfaces like eyelids, those tend to behave more aggressively and have a higher chance of metastasizing. The other thing that contributes to that is the size. If they're really big to begin with, the risk is quite a bit higher that they're going to spread.
Is there just one kind of melanoma, or are they all over the place? They can metastasize quite aggressively, right?
Yeah. So there are different types of melanomas, just like the other skin cancers. Similar to basal cells, most of those, and squamous cells, most of them, most of the melanomas that we find, we can actually treat just surgically. They don't spread, they don't metastasize, you don't need chemotherapy or anything else. But there are a certain percentage of them that will spread, and they can spread pretty fast.
You know, I have a guy I competed with in Ironman triathlons. Through this learning process, I'm learning how badly I treated my skin in Ironman triathlons. He was the world age group record holder in 4 different age groups. And not too long ago, he got diagnosed with a melanoma. And he went in, and 40 days later, he passed away. And he said, well, it was triathlon that I loved so much that killed me. They grow that fast, or they caught it at stage 4, and once you catch it at stage 4, or just vary all over the place.
Yeah, no, that's a terrible story that I think we probably hear about way too often regarding melanoma. So the most important thing about a melanoma is how deep it is when you first find it. So at a certain depth, their propensity to spread and metastasize goes up significantly. And that's not very deep. We're talking about 0.8 millimeters. That's when we decide we have to do further tests. But like I said before, most of them we find earlier than that. Probably 90% of them we find earlier than that. But once they gain that ability to spread, once they grow roots, and if they do spread, it becomes a very different ballgame. And yes, people can die pretty fast from it if you don't catch it on time and if you're not treated on time.
Part 2, who gets these cancers and how do they get them?
So I sent you a chart. I think it was melanoma rate around the world. And New Zealand and Australia were way up there. And then came Northern Europe and North America. Is this just a place where white people live, where the sun is intense?
Yeah, so the UV index is higher down there. And then there's a bunch of people that evolutionarily should have never lived there. And so, it also, Australia, New Zealand, they're very outdoorsy places, and people love to do things like hike and surf and et cetera. So otherwise, they're a healthy people, but their skin was not intended to be there. And so, yeah, they have the highest rate of skin cancer in the world, including melanoma.
Do most of your patients look like me?
I would say most patients who get skin cancer are Caucasians. They have skin that's capable of burning.
I love visiting California, but what do you own a sunscreen company out here? How would you exist?
We're not supposed to. We have this in common. Yes,
This is the palest talk show segment ever.
This is funny. If you go from me to you, Andy looks like Ricky Ricardo compared to us.
Blue eyes, freckles.
Blue eyes, yeah. Red hair definitely does it.
And when I was getting my surgery from you, you said, yeah, the left cheek is the most common because of driving in cars. And I was kind of flabbergasted by that because I thought I was in the shade.
Yeah, that's right. We definitely see more skin cancers and more overall sun damage on the left side of the face. And that is from driving. Some people drive convertibles or, have the windows down, and that allows both the UVA and UVB to come through and cause damage. But even if your window is up, the UVA rays still get through. And those cause a minority of skin cancers, but they still cause them, and quite a bit of the sun damage.
Well, hello, Dr. Karhade.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you. Especially it's good to see you when you're not looking at me saying, oh, we need to biopsy that.
Like a normal person, right?
Tell us a little bit about your background.
So my name's Dr. Kaveri Karhade. I'm a board-certified dermatologist in the Bay Area, California. And I focus a lot on medical derm as well as cosmetic dermatology. And so I'm always talking to my patients about prevention because I think prevention is so important, especially when it comes to skin cancer, but even other forms of sun damage and skin damage. Seeing this day in and day out, that's something that is very obvious to most of us in dermatology because you walk into a room and all signs of photoaging are usually worse on the left, at least in the United States. So we're talking forehead, cheeks, we're talking, chest, arm, backs of the hands. And sometimes it's even a stark difference. So there are other disorders on the skin that are related to sun exposure, not necessarily skin cancer risk, but things like brown spots, things like melasma, and we frequently see them on the left side of the body because of driving. There's actually a pretty famous New England Journal of Medicine article about a truck driver who had very prolonged, significant time sitting in a car driving, and even in just a picture of the front of his face, you can see very significant skin aging on one side, on the left side, and not the same on the right. And so I always find it an interesting topic of conversation when I have a patient who's from another country where they drive on the other side and you can actually see the opposite is true, more sun damage on the right side.
Dr. Walkler took his UV reader and tested windows in 29 automobiles from 15 manufacturers, and the findings aren't all that sunny.
This was a breakthrough study, and I was shocked by the results. But we actually found that the side windows of most cars really had poor UV protection against those rays from the sun. And that's why the dermatology studies have shown over and over again that there's more skin cancer, and now ophthalmology studies have shown there's more cataracts on the left side.
Those windows really don't block UVA at all. And that's why we even recommend people wear sunscreen when they're at home. So frequently I'll ask a patient, do you wear sunscreen every day? And the response is, I don't go out a lot. And to me, that it didn't answer the question at all, because that doesn't make any difference, doesn't matter. Because if you're at home, working from home all day, sitting near a window, you should be wearing sunscreen every day for skin aging and skin cancer risk. So you can actually get tinting done on your windows. It doesn't actually have to be tint or like make the window a little bit darker. I have that on my own car where it's clear, but it blocks UV light.
But I'm going to try to impress you with my new mirror.
Oh.
See that?
Oh, this is the UV one.
Have you seen one of these in person? Yeah. So one tap and you get the regular light, for the mirror. But when you hold it down, you get the UV image. I don't know if you can see, there's all kinds of reflections here.
I can see that. Wow, where did you get this from? This is very interesting.
Amazon, $129.
I hope you bring that to your next visit so I can try it out a little bit.
I will. It's a little bit shocking when I look at it.
Do you actually see like damage, like the UV damage?
Yeah, it's pretty clear. So this photo is not so clear. Let me see if I can get the camera to focus on that. I've seen these UV portraits, and various different people look quite different. I look like her. I got black spots all over the place.
I'd be so curious to see what the UV camera shows on an actual skin cancer.
Yeah, well, I don't want to see one of those on my skin cancer.
Fair.
So I guess the green indicates dried skin, and the real dark indicates more melanin production where there's probably some sun damage. Is that the idea?
Yeah, so it essentially lights up or highlights the areas that you've had sun damage, specifically freckles and things like that. We all have freckles from the sun, but some of them are more obvious than others, and those kind of bring out the ones that might be a little more hidden. I think it's a little humbling standing in front of those and just to see how much sun damage you have that you maybe didn't realize.
Part 3, miracle creams? Really?
So you prescribed these 2 creams for me. Can you explain what those are?
Absolutely. So what you are pointing to, or what you're showing, is primarily fluorouracil. That's the main active medication. 5-fluorouracil is a medication cream, and basically what it does is it helps to find skin damage from the sun, and it helps to treat it. Taking a step back, actually, 5-fluorouracil, I think it's a pretty cool medication. It was actually discovered because it's a chemotherapeutic agent, which I know sounds terrifying. But as the IV version of that medication was used to treat, lung cancer patients, they found a lot of those patients were getting these red spots on their arms and their face. And we're thinking, what is that? Well, it turns out that IV medication was actually treating DNA damaged skin cells, so abnormal skin cells that were at risk of turning into a skin cancer. And so it was turned into a cream. And so this cream is generally not absorbed into the bloodstream, but what it does when applied topically is over a couple of weeks, it can help identify which cells are abnormal, which is great because sometimes the cells are abnormal before we can see it in clinic. So before it becomes a clinical term called actinic keratosis, which is a formal type of spot that has enough DNA damage due to the sun that it's identifiable clinically. But fluorouracil can identify those damaged cells subclinically, so before it turns into that, and treat it that way. So it inhibits DNA synthesis and basically repairs that cell while doing nothing to normal skin, because if there's no DNA damaged, then it doesn't need to do anything. So it's a very elegant cream in that sense. The other cream that you showed there is called calcipotriene, and all that one does is it enhances absorption and allows us to keep the course of fluorouracil pretty short, because from what I described, it sounds like a magic cream, but anybody who's used it knows that it can induce a pretty significant reaction, a lot of redness and crustiness. In fact, the more reaction you get, the better. It means you need it to treat it, but it can be a little bit uncomfortable going through that. So the calcipotriene helps us to shorten that course down.
It's a little bit shocking. When I decided to get the creams out and use them, I went to YouTube to see if there were some tutorials and so on, and I'm just looking. It looked like people had the worst case of poison oak I've ever seen.
It can get pretty intense, but you know, the result is pretty impressive in terms of actually treating actinic damage, because I think people don't realize how much sun damage they actually have on all of their skin, all of their sun-exposed skin, and this can really help reverse it. There are other medications too that function similarly, like Ingenol. There's a new one out. There's one called imiquimod, which has been used for many years, and even a light-based therapy called photodynamic therapy. They all function in similar ways, and the differences between them are just nuances. But essentially, all of these medications just act as field treatment for actinic damage. Basically, find the sun-damaged cells and fix them.
Fluorouracil has been around a long time, right? Since 1970 or something like that?
It's been around a long time.
The first person I saw who looked like he had a terrible case of poison oak was a YouTuber who goes by the name of Captain Moonbeam. He's an airline pilot, so presumably he's got the windshields in front of him.
Yeah, you got a lot of UV there.
So he's fairly young when he got that treatment, and it looked just horrible. But he joked about it, and so I've reserved a few of those jokes. I thought they were pretty funny.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear them.
When people see you at the supermarket, they're shocked. And he said, so I just tell them something like,
yeah, I was working at the nuclear weapons factory. They let me go a couple of days ago, early retirement.
Well, that's the best part, right? You got to make up a fun story about how you got your battle scars.
Yeah, he's got a bunch of them. But speaking of scars, I followed up with him 9 years later to see his videos as clear as a bell.
You know, I will say, so I think I was mentioning to you at your last visit, but I used to work at a place where I had a lot of patients who had had multiple skin cancers and severe sun damage on their skin. And so most of my patients had actually at some point gone through a course of fluorouracil. As you can tell, I love this medication because it just works so well. Most of my patients also dislike it because of the reaction, but again, it really does help. And so my point to that story is that a lot of those patients, having gone through one or more courses of the fluorouracil, you could tell just walking in the room that they had done that, because face age looked 20 years younger than chest and arm age.
Really?
Yeah. And I actually did a lot of research on fluorouracil when I was in my training to look at cosmetic applications for fluorouracil, because, hey, look, if it fixes DNA damage that's causing skin cancer, maybe it's fixing sun damage that causes wrinkles and brown spots and all that stuff. And actually, lo and behold, we found that it does improve those things too. So I'm actually curious to see what kind of uses we could have for fluorouracil for younger patients who may not have developed a skin cancer yet, but who do have some evidence of sun damage.
So you said it treats actinic, like actinic keratosis. That's the precursor of squamous cell carcinoma, right?
Mm-hmm. It is.
But isn't basal cell the more common? What does it do for basal cell?
Those are great questions. So because fluorouracil can absorb into the epidermis, what it does is it will find DNA damage for either the cells that can potentially become actinic keratosis and then squamous cell, but it can also address the cells that are in the basal layer. And so by doing that, fluorouracil has actually been shown to help prevent both squamous cell and basal cell skin cancers. We frequently group the two together as non-melanoma skin cancer.
So I'm a fan of fluorouracil because it does work. It can reduce those what we call actinic keratoses, which are precancers, and it can clear up about 80, maybe even 90% of them if you use it correctly. And I call it a no pain, no gain cream. You're expected to look a little bit like a Christmas tree. If you're not, it's probably not working that well. I actually had my own dad go through fluorouracil before because he had a lot of actinic keratoses, and he lit up just like everyone else does. And it was kind of funny because he kept calling me and he'd say, "Son, are you sure you know what you're doing?" And I said, "Yes, Dad, I do. Just keep going. It'll be good."
You have a beautiful complexion. You're lucky to have that skin. I'm
Thank
jealous. You. What's your routine? What do you do?
Sure, happy to share that. So I think a lot of people are surprised to find how minimal most dermatologist routines really are, because right now, you know, there's a lot of marketing around skincare products, and there's a lot of discussion about these 10 and 15-step skincare routines, which frankly, most of us just don't have the time for. Luckily, you don't need it unless you enjoy it. My personal routine involves a gentle cleanser morning and night. I don't think cleansers are actually that important, meaning the brand. I think most of them are functional, and so the one you like is good enough. I follow that up with a vitamin C serum in the morning, and the reason for that is that's got antioxidant properties and it helps to protect against the elements like UV, but also against things like pollution. I like to liken it to, the reason we put lime in avocados to make guacamole. It helps to keep the avocados from tarnishing, and imagine a similar process is happening on your skin if you don't put something like vitamin C on. Especially because people with darker skin types like myself are a little bit more prone to brown spots in response to sun exposure. And so vitamin C can help to prevent that. So basically cleanser, vitamin C, followed by a sunscreen. A lot of different brands of sunscreen that I like. And then my evening routine is a cleanser followed by a prescription strength retinoid. And that's pretty much it.
So retinoid is a prescription medication, but the over-the-counter version is retinol?
So the retinol is basically just a slightly different chemical structure than a retinoid, and it makes it 50 times less potent, which is why it's approved for over-the-counter use. Retinoids are basically the same thing, just prescription strength. So they work much better. They're primarily prescribed for acne, but they also happen to have great cosmetic benefit in terms of helping to reverse a lot of the signs of aging, like wrinkles and brown spots.
You're a surfer, and I'm not a dermatopathologist, or however you pronounced it, but I don't see any skin cancers on your face. What do you do?
Well, I try my best to wear as much sunscreen as I can. I also try to surf early in the morning or late at night. I'm not out there in the middle of the day. There are some people who will advocate trying to avoid the sun at all costs, never going outside, covering up completely, but the truth is we love our sunshine here in California, and I know that my patients aren't going to do that, and I know that I'm not going to do that on a very consistent basis. So the best thing that you can do is try to be just responsible with the sun, like you would with alcohol or anything else like that. Try to avoid the midday sun where it's going to be the strongest. Try not to lay out in the sun if possible. Wear hats, wear sunglasses, wear sun protective clothing. Just try your best is what I try to tell most people. I recommend that everybody put sunscreen on as a routine thing in the morning, even before you leave the house.
Part 4, food. We often hear doctors and nutrition scientists say, eat a rainbow, and one reason is the colorful carotenoids get in our skin.
Who does not want a more glowy, luscious, and vibrant skin tone? Here in Michigan right now, it is winter, so it is dark and gloomy and cold, and we are not getting a lot of sun. So typically, my skin tone would be a whole lot paler than what it looks like right now. And I know you might be thinking, can I actually get a more tanned and vibrant skin tone just by eating foods? Or is this like some little gimmick? I am here to tell you from experience, this is facts. Typically, I am a pale person. I will try to insert a photo here from before I started eating these foods in my diet and really started to notice that I was building up a beautiful natural color.
As wild as that sounds, carotenoid intake versus skin tone is easy to measure in the lab, and she's right. This study fed a fruit and veggie smoothie to 81 Chinese Malaysians for 3 months and measured luminance and color in their faces, and it changed significantly. And your skin tone is somewhat tunable, kind of like mixing paint. Oh, you prefer less orange and more yellow? Maybe eat less papaya and more corn. I actually ate more papaya and sweet potato while preparing this episode. Can you tell?
And really quickly, I want to point out that there is a research study by Dr. Ian Stephen, an experimental psychologist, who tested a bunch of volunteers to see who they found more attractive, was tanned to mimic a suntan, and then there was another group that was tanned by the foods that they were eating, and the volunteers always rated the group that was tanned from the foods that they were eating as more attractive.
I chased that paper down and it was fascinating. The hypothesis going in was that the popularity of tanning demonstrates how healthy and attractive it makes us look, at least when we're young. How does that compare to eating carotenoid-rich foods? Caucasian college students in the UK and black college students in South Africa were able to manipulate various portraits on a calibrated monitor to simulate changing the amount of melanin from tanning and carotenoids from the food and skin. They were simply asked to make the skin look as healthy as they could, which has a strong correlation with attractiveness. And the shock was all the Caucasian students and the black ones preferred the carotenoid look to the tanned look. And the reason is tanning darkened skin, and they thought the somewhat lighter look of the carotenoid skin looked healthier. and both cultures preferred the somewhat yellower tint of the carotenoid skin. The experiment has been repeated in different countries, including tanning-obsessed Australia. And even there, people chose the carotenoid look. I would never have guessed that. But what about photoprotection? That experiment is trickier to perform because it involves reddening the skin with UV, which no one is happy about. 15 years ago, the Discovery Health Channel and the BBC made an episode that has always stuck with me. They took white UK volunteers and put a UV1 on one of their lily white butt cheeks to redden it. Then they fed them 4 tablespoons of tomato paste a day, this is the UK, for 3 months and placed their UV1 on the other butt cheek. They concluded it reduced photosensitivity by about 30%. Other studies have demonstrated greater results by including other carotenoids like beta-carotene, but I haven't found a study that directly computes the SPF number from eating a rainbow. But let's assume it cuts photosensitivity in half. Plausible. Sounds impressive until you realize that's an SPF factor of 2. So if you'd burn in 1 minute without sunscreen and 30 with it, that's an SPF of 30. Carotenoids have been shown to reduce the risk of some cancers, so with their antioxidant activity and their photoprotective effects, you would expect them to reduce the risk of skin cancer. Obviously, right? I mean, it is obvious, right? Unfortunately, many trials have been conducted about that, and to most scientists' surprise, the answer seems to be not significantly. What? How is that possible? So when you removed this one, you said it probably originated when you were a child. Why did you make that comment?
You know, the sun damage that caused that basal cell probably originated from when you were younger. Even if you've been very good about wearing sunscreen and hats over the past 10, 20 years, a lot of the sun damage has already been done.
Skin cancers take a long time to develop, and we don't have any studies that I'm aware of that go from early childhood into adulthood. My hypothesis is if we had studies like that, they would show results, but I'm guessing. For people thinking, that guy sounds like a biased vegan, I'll mention a carotenoid that's not found in fruits and vegetables, but is considered to be super healthy, astaxanthin. It originates in algae, but works its way up the food chain to salmon, lobsters, and shrimp to give them their pink-red color. I've always wondered why fish eaters do so well compared to meat and dairy eaters. Is it the omega-3s? Well, this looks like a significant factor. And yeah, I know, lutein, the yellow carotenoid that's so essential in preventing macular degeneration, is not just in corn and leafy greens, but also in egg yolks. Modern chickens are supplemented with lutein from marigolds to give eggs the look American consumers prefer. Someone asked why the faces of carnivore diet influencers seem to go red over time, and they rattled off some names like Tucker Goodrich, Ken Berry, Sean Baker, and Paul Saladino. It's because there are only 3 skin colorants: hemoglobin, carotenoids, and melanin. If they have skin types that don't build up melanin from tans like Paul has, and they're not consuming carotenoids, their skin is going to take on the color of hemoglobin. They have very different beliefs about the sun than anything you've heard in this episode.
I'm going to debunk some common myths while I feast on this animal-based diet of abundance. Organs, meat, fruit, honey, and raw dairy. Common myth: being in the sun is bad for you. Listen, your ancestors sought out the sun. There's a reason this feels good on my skin. On my skin, I am making endorphins, nitric oxide, cholesterol-containing molecules that are healthy and allow for laminar blood flow in our arteries. The sun is something that humans have always sought. This is a valuable resource. I'm gonna eat this animal-based breakfast, feasting on these foods while my skin and my body enjoys the abundance of this vitamin D from ultraviolet light. And you should too. Do not fear the sun, my friends.
In that clip, he's in Costa Rica, which has a UV index like Australia. Actually, white people never lived in a latitude like Costa Rica, not even close, and in the past few hundred years when they've tried, nature has pushed back hard. Even Hispanics and Native Americans evolved further north. Indigenous Australians look like this. In reading papers for this episode, I thought I had become familiar with skin tones, and to me, his looked like it had some orange carotenoids.
I want to show you guys my skincare routine. I take this very seriously. I'm in Costa Rica, I'm in the sun a lot. It's very important to really take care of the skin of my face and my body. I'm in my bathroom here. This is my skincare routine. I got meat and organs, fruit, you guys know, honey, raw dairy, an animal-based diet. What you eat is the best skincare routine.
And indeed, he eats fruit now. As for sunscreen, this is where he stands.
What in the holy goodness, jeez. Let's talk about this, guys.
Paul has a great sense of how to go viral. Everyone wants to hear from a good-looking guy who says putting on sunscreen is unnecessary if you get a tan and eating meat will protect you. But if you do want to hear from good-looking guys with good skin who go viral, I recommend dermatologists, not social media science deniers.
We're back. Dr. Maxfield, Dr. Shaw, and welcome back to our channel, Dr. Lee, where we talk about all things skincare and dermatology. Today, we did this thing so sunscreen wars.
Okay, I'm going in on the fluorouracil, gonna light up my face like a Christmas tree. But first I gotta lose this. In the next episode, you may hear my voice but not see my face, so I don't make you look away.